A fragile light broke through the dense fog of consciousness. He trembled like a flame in the wind, and with each of his hesitation, his heart in his chest contracted stronger. She stood in the corner of a small room, completely alone, surrounded by void and cold, where the walls seemed to breathe, slowly squeezing the space around. Inside, everything burned with anxiety, but it was impossible to pronounce it. "Can you hear?" A voice, low and icy, pierced the silence, as if the air itself rang. The girl tensed, trying to muffle trembling in her hands, but panic grew inside. Something threatened her, approaching unknown and ruthless, like a shadow behind her, which was relentlessly approaching. She tried to remember where she was, why here, but the mind refused to cooperate, as if memory was flooded with dark waves. "Why are you alone?" The question sounded nearby, but she did not dare to turn her head. The gaze fell to the floor. There on the old floor, a figure was reflected, which was at the same time familiar and alien. Her own reflection in a broken, cracked. The plate on the floor is a face distorted by fear and hopelessness. The eyes seemed too large, empty, as if nothing human was left in them. Each breath was given an echo in the head, tearing the silence and superimposing the voice that now sounded like a sentence. "You can't leave. You belong to us." A storm of conflicting feelings boiled in her chest. Horror, anger, self-pity. But the worst thing is that there could be no salvation. The system, built for years, is strong in its mind, delaying deeper into the web of the rules and prohibitions. Around, the ghosts of the past, an echo of other people's words, promises, and threats. She trembled, but inside something began to flare up, a quiet, barely noticeable flame of resistance, which could not be strangled. Hope was burning in this tiny light. At least one day the opportunity to break out, to remember who she really is, and stop being afraid. Memories poured like a muddy river, then taking it to the serene days of childhood, then lowering it into dark depths where the light barely pierced the wall's sculptural isolation. She remembered how she first got here, very small, with burning eyes and faith in good, in which they promised to teach to believe. Then it seemed to be a game, almost a fairy tale. But the fairy tale quickly turned into a nightmare, where each sound became a threat, and every smile became pretense. In those days, adults said that the world behind the walls is darkness, that only here in the circle of the elect it is safe. Their words sounded like spells, weaving invisible chains on her soul. They taught that freedom is an illusion, that real life is a service, complete self, denial, and endless devotion to the group. Love, joy, even fear, everything was obeyed by strict laws where there was no place for doubts. She remembered how she first felt an internal protest. It was a quiet voice inside that whispered, "This is not true." He appeared when the eldest woman, who called herself a mentor, said that feelings are a sin, that you can't cry, you can't dream. She then tried to hide her tears, fearing that they will follow the punishment, but the heart demanded freedom, demanded to breathe. Every year the chains became stronger. The girl learned to hide her thoughts, smile at the right time, say what they expect to hear, but inside it grew like a flower in the desert, weak but persistent. Sometimes at night, when the rest slept, she went out into the cold yard and looked at the stars, those that seemed so distant and inaccessible. There, upstairs, it seemed that another world exists, the world without fear and without shackles. A look at the ceiling. The cracks in the plaster resembled the lines in her palms, those that fate seemed to draw the most difficult path for her. She wondered, who is she, if not part of this group? Who is she? By itself, without other people's voices, without imposed rules. It was too scary to think about it openly. There was a constant battle in her soul, between what was imposed since childhood and what was torn out. Every day he brought new tests, control, observation, testing fidelity. Her fear was not only before punishment. He was a fear of losing himself, dissolving forever in a foreign world, in other people's dreams and expectations. But even at the most dark, hope lived inside. The hope that one day she will be able to breathe deeply, look back and say, I survived. The hope that somewhere there behind these walls, there is a life where it can become herself. And it was this thought that gave her strength, no matter what, to give up. Days merged into grey infinity, painted in gloomy shades of strict rules and constant control. She had long stopped keeping diaries, fearing that someone would find them and read secret thoughts as a forbidden book capable of destroying the illusion of unity and obedience. The inner world became an increasingly maze where every thought could become a trap, every doubt a threat. I remember how one evening, when the whole camp fell asleep, she heard whisper behind the wall. Thin voices, pierced by fear and hope, intertwined into a secret conspiracy. These were those who, like her, could not come to terms with the chains that were connected by them. Their words were as a call for freedom, but at the same time as a whisper of death. Were they ready for what could happen? Doubts tormented her, but the desire to break out became stronger. That night, she first felt that loneliness was not completely. Somewhere in these nameless souls, the same longing was beating, the same fear. She tried to understand how to unite these crumbs of courage, how to go through this darkness without losing herself. The light flickered in this, even if it was tiny. But it was. The memory returned her back to the past, by the day when she was first subjected to cleansing. Then in the temple, under the ruthless look of the leader, she experienced humiliation, fear, and pain, as if the old wounds opened again, and it seemed that they would never heal. Each blow, every word, was a test, check, and she was forced to be silent. But at that moment, something cracked inside an invisible barrier behind which her personality was hiding. Memories mixed with the present. She felt the walls of the room squeezing, as if a living entity that was trying to absorb it entirely. The heart was pounding, breathing was straying, but in the depths there was a determination. Not to surrender, not to allow yourself to break completely. The internal dialogue was a merciless wave. Who are you? What do you want? Why are you afraid? Questions torn the soul, but at the same time they became an anchor, holding on the verge between humility and struggle. Every day, like a new battle for the right to be yourself. Once, when she stood on the edge of the abyss of despair, a woman from the elders came up to her, whom everyone was afraid and at the same time loved. This woman seemed to know more than any other, but in her eyes some hidden fire was burning, a mixture of pain and understanding. You are not alone, she whispered. And even if it seems that the whole world is against you, there is a power inside you that no one can pick up. But in order to survive, you need to understand. It's better not to fight with your head, but by your heart. These words were like light in the dark, like a quiet melody among the noise of the wind. They laid the seeds of hope and gave the opportunity to think, what if life inside the group is not the only way? What if you can find the road outside, despite all the fears and prohibitions? Several months passed, filled with hidden conversations and stolen glances. Every day it became harder. The inner burden of doubt and fear crushed more and more. But at the same time, determination grew with this. She began to listen more carefully to her feelings, tried to understand where the imposed fear ended and her own I begins. One evening, when the camp plunged into the night silence, she secretly left the room. The heart was beating so loudly that it seemed to be heard in every corner. The steps on the creaky floor seemed deafening, and each sound was the threat of exposure. But the desire to break out of captivity was stronger than fear. On the street, cool air burned the skin, recalling freedom, which she almost forgot. She looked around. Everything was gloomy around, and the shadows seemed alive. But in this darkness a light of hope shone. Slowly, carefully, she walked along the path leading to the border where the old fence with barbed wire stood. At this moment, the past surfaced like a terrible dream. Scenes of punishments, screams, betrayal. Her thoughts were torn between fear and desire for freedom. Each step was given with pain, but she could not turn back. Somewhere deep inside, determination flared up to become free, no matter what. Suddenly, a man came out from the corner, one of those who never showed kindness. His eyes glowed with cold and suspicion. "Where are you going?" His voice sounded like a sentence. She froze but did not give fear to win. A look met with him, and at that moment she realized she would have to fight not only with external shackles, but also with internal demons. "I am following my life," she answered quietly but firmly. The man grinned, but did not take a step forward. She knew this moment would solve everything, either freedom or eternal imprisonment. While he stood evaluating her, in his soul there was a storm. Fear mixed with hope, despair with force. She realized this path will be a thorny, but this is her path. She chose him. Her legs trembled, but she did not recede. The man, as if reading her determination, stepped aside as if allowing to pass. My heart pounded as if I was about to break out of my chest. Each step by the fence was filled with trepidation, as if it left not only a physical place, but also part of herself, forever. A cold wind erupted through the thorny wire, and for the first time in many years, it breathed air full of freedom and unknown. The moon illuminated the road. The fog played in the moonlight, creating the illusion of mystery, as if the world lurked his breath, watching it shoot. The soul was torn to pieces. The pain of loss and horror before the future fought with the boundless joy of the opportunity to start again. Her thoughts broke into a whirlpool of memories, a childhood filled with fleeting moments of joy, the faces of those whom she once considered a family, the words that cut like knives. The first days behind the walls of the group were frightening and single. There were no usual voices, there were no schedule, there were no correct words. Everything that before seemed unshakable collapsed, leaving her in the face of himself. Nights became a test. Nightmares returned the image of the leader of the group, his cold look and cruel words. She woke up in a cold sweat, covered by fear which had not yet left. But every morning the fire inside became brighter. In the world behind the walls, she met people, strangers whose views did not judge, but understood. Slowly, carefully, she learned to trust, learned to talk about herself. For the first time in a long time, her voice sounded free, without fear of being convicted. But the path to healing was a thorny. The habits laid down for years clung to consciousness, like the shadows of the past, without resting. She struggled with inner voices that tried to convince her that freedom is a deception, that it was better to return to familiar shackles. Time treated, but did not completely erase. Every day I was a challenge. To find yourself, accept the past, and believe in the future. And with every little step, it became stronger. Several months have passed. She was no longer the timid girl who was afraid of the shadows of her own reflection. Now she learned to live again. She learned to breathe freely, think on her own, love herself. In her eyes, a light caught fire, which no one could extinguish. Sometimes the memories returned, heavy and bitter, like a bitter taste in the tongue. She recalled conversations in a circle, where every word was weighed as much as gold, and mistakes were punished by cold and alienation. She recalled how dreams were broken and made me believe that the world behind the walls is hell. But she understood one simple truth. The past is part of her, but not her whole life. She could build a new path where fear would not be the main character. She learned to forgive, not for the sake of those who caused pain, but for the sake of herself, to free her heart from severity. On one of these days, when the sun affectionately warmed the earth, it met the person who became her light in the dark tunnel. He did not ask questions, did not require an explanation. He was just nearby, listened and supported. With him, she first felt that trust is not a weakness, but strength, that love can be unconditional and free. He helped her understand that a real family is those who accept you as you are, without masks and lies. But the past did not let go easily. Sometimes she woke up in the middle of the night, covered by panic. Her heart was beating so quickly that it seemed to jump out of her chest. Sometimes deep sadness rolled her, the realization of how much was lost, how much was stolen. At such moments, she went into herself, tried to find comfort in silence and peace. And then power came, quiet but unshakable. The power that said, "You experienced it. You are alive. You are free." This struggle between the shadow of the past and the light of the present became its constant companion. But now she was no longer afraid of this struggle. She knew only after passing through her, you can become really free.